A billionaire tycoon pointed angrily at a janitor's 10-year-old son and snapped, "Fix this, and you'll save my legacy, kid." The room erupted in laughter. Engineers, executives, regulators. None of them believed the boy could do what their elite minds had failed to do for 5 straight days. But Lucas, a 10-year-old, didn't flinch. He stepped toward the screen. Everyone felt the air shift. Something dangerous, something brilliant was about to happen. Hudson Dynamics had survived scandals, lawsuits, even government pressure. But nothing prepared the world for the moment its greatest invention began to fail. While experts panicked and the media circled like sharks, one truth became undeniable. Something inside the Hudson core had gone disastrously wrong. And with every passing second, the company's future slipped further out of Douglas Hudson's control. He stood in the glare of cameras, surrounded by people with degrees, titles, and reputations far bigger than their solutions. Not one of them could explain why the system he had poured his soul into was collapsing. But the most important person in the room that day wasn't an engineer, an investor, or a regulator. It was a boy no one had come to notice. Lucas Williams, quiet, observant, unnoticed, watched the chaos with a strange calm, standing beside his mother, a janitor simply trying to finish a shift. And while the world saw a crisis, the boy saw something else entirely. Something hidden in the very lines of code that had defeated the brightest minds in the building. What happened next would defy logic, silence the room, and expose the first thread of a sabotage woven deep inside Hudson Dynamics. It would pull 3 unlikely lives together. A billionaire on the edge, a mother caught in the crossfire, and a child whose brilliance no one believed existed. And the moment Lucas stepped forward would become the spark that changed everything. Because the real story wasn't the system that failed, but something no one could explain yet, something that would reshape Douglas Hudson's legacy, expose a hidden betrayal. In this impossible moment, a boy, a broken system, and a billionaire on the edge was only the beginning. What Lucas discovered next would unravel the truth behind Hudson Dynamics, exposing a year-long sabotage and pull Sarah and Douglas into a story of genius, redemption, and unexpected love. But before we continue, click like, subscribe, and tell me where in the world you're watching from. Now let's dive in. The world was watching Hudson Dynamics collapse. Inside the company's main operations lab, sterile white floors, blinding lights, and walls dripping with monitors. Warning sirens pulsed like a dying heartbeat. On every screen, the same message glared in violent red. System failure. Federal regulators sat in tight rows like vultures waiting for death. International investors whispered behind polished briefcases. Journalists captured every moment for their feeds. The atmosphere was electric, tense, like the air that hangs right before a tornado touches down. And standing in the center of this storm was the man who had built it all. Douglas Hudson, billionaire, engineer, visionary, now potential national disgrace. His heart hammered as another simulation crashed. "Restart it," he snapped at his lead technician. We did, sir." "For times." The engineer's voice trembled. "It fails instantly." Douglas's eye twitched. His legacy, years of brilliance, innovation, sleepless nights, was burning to ashes in front of the entire world. The Hudson core was his masterpiece, a system designed to manage bridges, power grids, traffic flows, virtually the backbone of modern infrastructure. And today, in its most important demonstration, the system had imploded. Regulators exchanged looks that screamed lawsuits. Investors clutched phones, ready to pull their billions. Competitors watched the live stream with predatory delight. Douglas's pulse spiked. He swallowed the taste of panic. This was supposed to be his triumph. Instead, it was his public execution. Behind Douglas, teams of elite engineers clattered on keyboards. Mit prodigis, Stanford elites, Silicon Valley legends. None of them had answers. Lines of code whirled across screens, redder with every passing second. The Hudson core was collapsing from the inside, and no one could find the root. His empire was unraveling. His reputation is fracturing. His future is evaporating. And just when Douglas felt the heat of humiliation crawl up his neck, he noticed something in the corner. Not an engineer, not an executive, not someone who belonged in this room at all. A janitor, Sarah Williams. Black, 37, hardworking, quiet. She wasn't supposed to be here. She was only covering a double shift. Her yellow gloves were still on, her face frozen between fear and confusion. And beside her was her son. 10-year-old Lucas Williams stood next to his mother, small hands clutching a worn gray sketchbook. He wasn't watching Douglas. He wasn't watching the engineers. He was watching the system failure screens. Unblinking, focused, like he was reading something invisible to everyone else. Douglas barely registered any of that. To him, Sarah and Lucas were nothing but a reminder of how low things had sunk. He couldn't control the system. He couldn't control the engineers. He couldn't control the regulators. But he could control this. He turned abruptly toward the pair. Sarah jumped. Lucas didn't. Douglas jabbed a finger toward the boy. "Hey, kid," Douglas growled through clenched teeth. "Fix this, and you'll save my legacy." The room erupted in shocked laughter. Regulators smirked. Investors shook their heads. Engineers stared in disbelief. Sarah's voice cracked. "Sir, please, he's just a child. We'll leave right now." But Lucas stepped forward. He didn't look frightened. He didn't even look confused. He looked sure. His eyes locked onto the main display screen, exactly like in the uploaded photo, his small finger lifting slowly, pointing toward the cascading red alerts. Douglas scoffed. "You think you see something?" He mocked loudly, eager to reclaim some kind of authority. Lucas nodded once. Calmly. "Right there," he said. "That's why it's failing." The laughter died instantly. Engineers froze. Sarah gasped, hands hovering near her face. "What were you pointing at?" one of the technicians asked shakily, stepping closer. Lucas stepped forward again, his voice steady. "You're telling the system to do something it can't understand. You mix two logic paths. If you ask it the wrong way, it tries to fix the wrong thing." The lead engineer blinked. That can't be right. That would mean..." Lucas continued, pointing at a specific block of code no one had touched for days. "That line. It's upside down." A hush swept through the room. One of the techs scrambled to the keyboard and opened the segment Lucas indicated. Douglas leaned forward despite himself. Everyone waited. The engineer made a single, tiny correction. One character. One symbol. Enter. The monitors flickered. Alarms faded. Red turned yellow. Yellow turned green. Green spread across every subsystem like a sunrise. The room gasped. Someone whispered, "No way." Another engineer covered her mouth. A regulator stood up from his chair. Douglas's jaw dropped. For the first time in 5 days. The Hudson core stabilized. Lucas stepped back beside his mother, calm as if he had just tied his shoes. Sarah trembled, tears in her eyes, unable to process what she had witnessed. Douglas stared at the boy like he was seeing him for the first time in his life. This wasn't luck. This wasn't a coincidence. This was brilliance. Pure, untrained brilliance. And for the first time that day, Douglas felt something stronger than fear, stronger than humiliation. He felt the ground shift beneath him. The world had just changed, because the one person who saved his empire was the last person he had ever taken seriously. And this moment was only the beginning. For a full 3 seconds, no one in the room breathed. Green lights pulsed across the Hudson core like slow, steady heartbeats, steady for the first time in days. The wall of monitors glowed with stability logs, data streams smoothing out as though the system itself had exhaled in relief. Then the silence shattered. Engineers lunged toward their stations. Regulators stood so sharply their chairs screeched. Phones came out. Microphones clicked on. Someone cursed. Someone else said a prayer. But Sarah Williams only did one thing. She grabbed her son's hand and whispered frantically, "Lucas, we need to go. Now." Lucas didn't move. His small body stayed rooted to the tile floor, eyes still fixed on the glowing displays. Sarah tugged again, her voice shaking. "Baby, please. Don't touch him." Douglas Hudson's voice boomed across the room, halting everything. He wasn't yelling in anger. He was yelling because he had just witnessed something impossible, and the only anchor in the chaos was the small boy who made it happen. The crowd split as Douglas strode toward them, jaw clenched, face unreadable. Sarah instinctively stepped between him and her son. "Sir, I'm sorry," she rushed out. "He didn't mean anything. He didn't touch anything important. We'll leave right now." Douglas ignored her apology completely. He crouched slightly to look Lucas in the eyes. "What did you see?" It wasn't a question. It was a demand, laced with the dying remains of his pride and the rising storm of something else, awe. Lucas blinked up at him, unbothered. "I saw the part that was wrong." Douglas exhaled sharply, trying not to appear rattled. "Yes, we all saw the part that was wrong once you pointed at it. What I want to know is how you saw it." Lucas tilted his head. "I just looked." An engineer behind them muttered. "Just looked? Are you kidding me?" Another whispered. "No one even checked that segment." That code was buried in 3 layers. Lucas traced a small circle on the air with his finger, as though illustrating a picture only he could see. "It's like when you draw something," he said. "If one line is backwards, the whole picture feels weird. So I just found the line that didn't belong." Sarah squeezed her eyes shut in mortification. Her son was talking to a billionaire CEO like he was explaining crayons. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Hudson," she whispered, stepping forward again. "He's just imaginative. He doesn't understand how big this is. We'll leave." Douglas raised a hand, silencing her. "No," he said. "He stays." Those words dropped into the room like a stone into deep water. A few regulators exchanged glances. 2 engineers froze mid-typing. Sarah felt her stomach twist. Lucas, unfazed, looked past Douglas and back at the screens. "You're still asking it the wrong questions," he murmured. Every head turned sharply. Douglas's eyebrows shot up. "The system is stable." "It doesn't mean it's fixed," Lucas replied simply. "It's confused." A tremor of unease rippled across the engineering team. Wait. What do you mean confused?" one of the tech leads asked. Lucas pointed at a cluster of green indicators. "The part that broke, you covered it up. You didn't solve the thing that made it break." He said it gently, innocently, but the implication made a cold wave slice down Douglas's spine. Engineers began clicking furiously again, screens filling with deeper logs. And Sarah, poor Sarah, looked like she wanted the floor to open and swallow her. "Lucas, stop," she whispered urgently. "We're leaving. Right now." But Lucas kept staring at the data. His eyes weren't darting like the adult's eyes. They moved slowly, steadily, like someone following the shape of a puzzle they already knew. Douglas's voice cut in, strained. "Kid, what exactly do you see?" Lucas blinked. "Patterns." "Patterns in what?" "All of it." He lifted his hand, sweeping across thousands of lines of data, streaming across dozens of monitors. "It's like a picture. It tells a story if you read it right." The room went completely still. No engineer in that lab, none of the MIT graduates, none of the Silicon Valley veterans had ever described complex system diagnostics as a picture, but made a strange sort of sense. "Are you telling me," an engineer whispered, "that you can visualize the entire core architecture at once?" Lucas shrugged. "It's just there." A young programmer blurted out, "That's not possible." But the lead technician cut him off with a trembling whisper. "It's exactly what he did." Sarah felt heat rush to her face. "I'm so sorry," she stammered, her voice cracking. "He's just a child with a big imagination. Please don't encourage. He's not imagining anything." Douglas's tone was low and sharp. He stepped forward, towering over the boy, almost desperately. "Tell me something, Lucas," he said softly. "When you pointed to that code, was it luck?" Lucas considered it seriously. "No." "Then how?" "Because it didn't feel right." "What does that even mean?" Douglas demanded. Lucas looked up at him calmly. "If someone hides something inside a picture, the colors change. You don't have to see the secret to feel the wrong colors." Every engineer in the room froze. A regulator slowly lowered her tablet. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." And for the first time that day, it wasn't panic filling the room. It was fear, real bone-deep fear, because this child was operating on a level none of them could touch. Douglas swallowed thickly. His pride was clawing at his throat, trying to keep him dignified, authoritative, superior. So he straightened his shoulders and said, "It's not as impressive as it sounds. The system was already stabilizing before the correction. The boy just made a lucky guess." The lie tasted bitter even to him. A wave of disbelief rolled through the engineering team. He didn't make a guess. He pointed at a logic splice no one else reviewed. He saw corrupted architecture in under 10 seconds. You didn't see the way he tracked the logs? He wasn't guessing. Douglas shot them a glare, and the room fell silent again, though tension pulsed like static electricity. Lucas finally looked away from the monitors, turning toward the adults who were arguing over him like he wasn't even there. "I didn't fix everything," he said softly. Douglas's head snapped back toward him. "What?" Lucas pointed to another cluster of green indicators, this time higher on the display wall. "That part is wrong too. And that one. And that one." He moved his finger 3 more times. The room erupted again. "Those subsystems are completely isolated. How did he connect them? Those logs aren't even visible on this monitor. He shouldn't be able to know that." Lucas spoke over the noise, his voice still gentle. "They're all talking to each other the wrong way. Someone changed the order." That sentence struck the room like a thunderbolt. Someone changed the order. A regulator stood up sharply. "Mr. Hudson, are you telling us your core system was tampered with?" Douglas stiffened. "No, absolutely not." "But the child, he is not a qualified source," Douglas snapped. "I will not have my company's reputation tied to the imagination of a 10-year-old. Sarah flinched. Lucas didn't. "But it was changed," Lucas said simply. "Things don't break like that unless someone wants them to." The regulators froze. Investors leaned forward. Engineers stared at the boy as though he were speaking prophecy. Sarah grabbed his hand again, her voice shaking harder than before. "Lucas, sweetheart, please stop talking. Please. Not here." Lucas finally looked up at her. "Did I do something wrong?" Her heart splintered. "No, baby, you didn't. You just don't understand how dangerous." Mrs. Williams, a regulator, interrupted softly. "We need to ask your son a few questions." Sarah's blood ran cold. "No," Douglas cut in sharply. "No, you don't." The regulator frowned. "Mr. Hudson, your system just stabilized after a catastrophic event. We are required to document every factor that led to that stabilization." "And you will," Douglas said firmly, "but we will not involve a child in federal documentation." The lie was obvious. He didn't want anyone to know a child had saved his empire. He didn't want anyone to know he hadn't. Sarah stepped backward, shielding Lucas behind her. "Please," she whispered, voice cracking. "He didn't mean any harm. He won't talk to anyone. Please just let us go home." Douglas opened his mouth, but Lucas's small voice cut the room in half. "I can show you where the other wrong parts are." Every breath in the room vanished. Sarah felt tears sting her eyes. She shook her head in panic. "Lucas, no." Douglas stepped closer, pride and desperation warring on his face. "Listen to me, kid," he said quietly. "You don't say another word unless I ask you to. Do you understand?" Lucas blinked. "What?" Douglas leaned in, lowering his voice so only the boy could hear. But the room was so silent that every word carried anyway. "Because what you just did," his voice cracked, barely audible, "shouldn't be possible." Lucas didn't flinch. He just pointed back to the monitors. "It's like a broken story. If you fix the wrong parts, the ending still won't work." An engineer whispered tremulously, "He's not describing code. He's describing architecture." Another murmured, "This kid sees the whole system at once, like a map." Sarah couldn't take it anymore. She pulled Lucas in her arms, hugging him protectively. "We're done," she said. Please stop using him like this." Douglas opened his mouth, to argue, to command, to demand. But a regulator stepped forward, her voice calm and firm. "Mr. Hudson, we need to know the truth." Douglas straightened, swallowing every shred of vulnerability. "The truth," he said coldly, "is that I stabilized the system, and now I will handle the rest." It was a lie, a desperate one, and, judging by the looks on the regulators' faces, no one believed him. Lucas tugged lightly on his mother's sleeve, voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, I can fix the rest." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Baby, I know you can. She swallowed a sob. But I need to keep you safe. Lucas looked up at her, confused, innocent, and heartbreakingly sincere. Safe from what? Sarah opened her mouth. But Douglas answered first. From a truth you just uncovered. The room went still as stone. Because everyone knew, whatever the boy had seen inside the Hudson core, it wasn't just a glitch. It was sabotage. And Lucas had just become the only person in the world who could expose it. For a moment, the room existed in a strange, heavy stillness. As though every person inside Hudson Dynamics knew they were standing on the edge of something enormous and irreversible. The regulators stared at Lucas like he was a live wire. The engineers kept sneaking glances at him as though he might start rewriting physics next. And Sarah, all she wanted was to take her son home and pretend none of this had happened. Douglas Hudson stood at the center of the room, the weight of humiliation and pride mixing into something volatile behind his eyes. His empire had been saved, but not by him, and that truth clung to him like smoke. He straightened slowly, tugging at his suit jacket. A single thought formed, a sharp, desperate one. He had to reclaim control, and he had to do it fast. He turned toward the waiting cameras, the journalists, the investors gathering in the back of the operations lab. His face slid into a practiced mask of cool confidence. Ladies and gentlemen, Douglas began, loudly enough for every recorder in the room to catch it. It seems we've experienced quite a thrilling moment. A stir moved through the crowd. Sarah froze. Lucas looked up curiously. Douglas gestured toward the boy with a casual flick, as though mentioning weather instead of genius. You all witnessed an interesting observation made by the young man here. A fake smile. Polished. Controlled. Cold. But the Hudson core is far from being repaired. What you saw was only a temporary stabilization. The real work, the full architectural restoration, remains undone. The investors leaned in. The journalists angled their cameras. Sarah's grip tightened on her son. Lucas simply blinked. Douglas stepped forward, voice rising. So let's make tonight memorable. And then he said it, the sentence that would ignite everything. Fix the full architecture by dawn, and you'll save my legacy. Gasps rippled through the room. A few people laughed in disbelief. One journalist actually choked on her gum. An investor muttered, he's gone insane. Douglas ignored all of it. He pointed directly at Lucas, the challenge landing like a blow. You have until sunrise. Sarah's breath caught. You can't be serious. He's a child. Douglas didn't even look at her. All he has to do is repeat whatever miracle you all think he performed, he said dryly. Unless, of course, it was just luck. More laughter, this time sharper mocking. Sarah moved instinctively in front of Lucas. This is exploitation, she hissed. He's tired. He needs to go home. You will not use him as a prop for your ego. Douglas's jaw twitched, but his tone stayed maddeningly calm. Mrs. Williams, if your son is as gifted as everyone seems to believe, he'll have no trouble disproving me. Her voice cracked with fury. He doesn't need to prove anything. Lucas tugged gently on her sleeve. Mom. She turned to him, eyes pleading, terrified. We're going home, she whispered. Right now, before this gets worse. But Lucas shook his head. His voice was small but steady. Mom, I want to try. Sarah felt her heart break open. Lucas, no. Not for him. Not for these people. Lucas's hands curled into her shirt, but he didn't look away from the monitors glowing across the lab. I already see what's wrong, he said softly. Her breath stalled. What do you mean? He pointed to the data streams again, long walls of green and yellow that no normal mind could decipher at a glance. The pieces don't fit, he said. They're supposed to connect like a puzzle, but somebody changed the order. I can fix it. Baby, this isn't your responsibility. I know, Lucas replied. But if I don't fix it, something bad will happen. The quiet certainty in his voice sent a cold shiver through her. Douglas's eyes narrowed, watching the scene unfold. He had expected fear, confusion, hesitation, but not this calm determination. He stepped in smoothly, seizing the moment. Well then, Douglas announced to the crowd, since the young man is eager to assist, We'll give him every opportunity. He snapped his fingers. Team Gamma, escort him to the auxiliary console. Watch him. Record everything. Several engineers hesitated. Sir, he's 10. One whispered uncertainly. And he is free to fail spectacularly, Douglas said, turning away. That's the point. His voice dipped lower. He won't get far. It was meant to be quiet. It wasn't. Sarah heard it. Lucas heard it. And something sparked in the boy's eyes. Not anger. Not fear. Determination. He released his mother's shirt and walked forward. Sarah followed immediately, practically glued to his side. Lucas, please. Just because you can doesn't mean you have to. It's okay, he said softly. I'm not doing it for him. That stopped her cold. He reached out and took her hand. I'm doing it for you. Sarah's throat closed. She couldn't speak. By the time they reached the secondary console, a cluster of engineers had gathered, whispering, observing, unsure whether to treat Lucas like a prodigy or a liability. The screens towered over him. Lines of code moved in dense, complex threads. Lucas sat in the chair. His feet didn't touch the floor. Sarah stood behind him, hands on his shoulders, heart pounding. He placed his fingers lightly on the keyboard, hesitant, like someone touching an unfamiliar instrument. Then he inhaled, and the hesitation vanished. His eyes narrowed, scanning the monitors with shocking focus. One of the engineers murmured, "He's tracking all of it." All at once. Another whispered, "This is impossible." Lucas touched a key. One key. Instantly, 12 windows expanded. Diagnostics unfolded like blooming flowers. Sarah's jaw dropped. The engineers froze. The regulators leaned forward. Lucas began to type. Not like a trained programmer. Not like someone following logic. He typed like someone tracing a melody. Fluid, rhythmic, intuitive. Screens shifted rapidly, reorganizing themselves in response to his commands. He flipped between layers faster than any technician in the room. The engineers stared, awed and terrified. He's reorganizing the architecture. He found crosslinks we didn't know were there. He's undoing the patch we applied yesterday. How did he know? He sees structure like it's a map. Sarah's hand pressed against her mouth. Lucas worked silently, his brow furrowed in delicate concentration. Every so often, he would whisper something under his breath. That line doesn't belong. Why is this backwards? This isn't talking to that. This path is wrong. Sarah leaned in. Sweetheart, are you okay? Do you need water? No. Do you want to take a break? Later. She felt tears prick her eyes. He wasn't overwhelmed. He wasn't frightened. He was in his element. For the first time in his short life, the world made sense to him. Across the lab, behind the glass wall of his office, Douglas Hudson watched the scene unfold. At first, he observed with smug amusement, arms crossed, smirk in place, waiting for the moment the boy would break under pressure. But the smirk faded. His posture stiffened. His eyes narrowed. Lucas wasn't breaking. He was building, faster than any engineer Douglas employed. His fingers moved with eerie precision. His eyes never darted. They glided, steady, confident. He was seeing a world Douglas himself had spent decades trying to master. And suddenly, for the first time in years, Douglas felt something unfamiliar swelling in his chest. Unease. Real, gnawing, disorienting unease. His assistant stepped into the office. Sir, should I prepare a statement for the press? Douglas barely heard her. Down below, Lucas pulled up a hidden code layer, one no one had accessed in months. Even from the office, Douglas recognized it. His stomach dropped. He found it. Already? The assistant repeated nervously. Mr. Hudson? Douglas didn't answer. Something was unraveling. Not in the system. In him. The harder Lucas worked, the more cracks formed in the foundation of Douglas's pride. Because no matter what he told the cameras downstairs, no matter what narrative he tried to spin, he was finally facing the truth. This child wasn't a fluke. He wasn't lucky. He wasn't guessing. He was extraordinary. And if Lucas finished what he started, Douglas's world would never be the same. The hours after midnight settled over Hudson Dynamics like a thick, humming fog. Most of the building had emptied. Journalists escorted out, investors bussed away, regulators moved to an observation room. But in the operations lab, the lights were still painfully bright, and Lucas was still working. He sat in the chair that dwarfed him, legs dangling, eyes fixed on the glowing screens. His small fingers danced over the keyboard, steady and tireless, guided not by training, but by instinct, by a sight that no one else in the room possessed. Subsystem after subsystem unfolded before him like a series of broken puzzles. And Lucas put them back together, one piece at a time, one breath at a time, one impossible correction at a time. Engineers who had scoffed at him earlier now hovered behind him in a semicircle, silent, wide-eyed, absorbing every move. Where they once saw a janitor's son, they now saw something else entirely. A child who saw systems like music, a mind that turned chaos into patterns, a talent that exceeded their decades of expertise. "Look how he tracks the cross-dependencies," one whispered. He flagged a recursive loop before the scanner did. He rearranged an entire module in under 10 seconds, and he didn't even test run it. He just knew. Their voices were hushed, reverent, almost fearful. Sarah stood behind Lucas the entire time, one hand gently resting on his shoulder, the other pressed against her own heart. She watched her son navigate a world she didn't understand, but somehow knew he belonged to. A destiny she had never imagined for him, not even in her wildest dreams or deepest fears. Every so often, Lucas would pause, not in confusion, but in focus. He'd tilt his head, eyes narrowing at a specific cluster of code. And then he'd whisper, "That's wrong," and fix it. By 2 a.m., he had repaired things the engineers didn't even know were broken. By 2:30, he had corrected architecture someone had assumed was flawless. By 2:45, he had stabilized subsystems that had been unstable for months. And all the while, tucked away in his glass office, Douglas Hudson watched. He had abandoned his attempt at pretending he didn't care. He pressed both hands against the glass, as if getting closer to the boy might help him understand the impossible mind at work. Every now and then, he muttered to himself, "How is he doing that? No one works that fast. That loop took my chief architect 3 weeks. He can't even reach the floor, and he's rewriting infrastructure." For the first time in years, the arrogance in his voice was fading. Respect, unwanted, reluctant, uncontrollable, was taking its place. But beneath that respect was something darker. Fear, because talent like Lucas's didn't appear out of nowhere. And whoever tampered with the Hudson Core, whoever planted the failures, whoever tried to destroy Douglas's empire, had just met the one person capable of exposing them. At around 3:07 a.m., everything changed. Lucas's fingers slowed, his brow knitted, his posture stiffened. Sarah felt him tense. "Baby," she whispered softly, "do you need a break?" Lucas didn't answer. He leaned forward, eyes locked onto a dense knot of code buried deep within the system architecture. So deep no engineer had gone there in years. A few of the tech leads noticed his sudden stillness. What's he looking at? Did something crash? No, everything's still stable. But Lucas wasn't looking at stability. He was looking at something hidden. Something is wrong. His breath grew shallow. Sarah crouched beside him. "Lucas." He lifted a trembling finger at the screen. "That wasn't broken before," he whispered. One of the engineers leaned in. "Which part?" Lucas zoomed in. A loop appeared. It twisted over itself, recursive and chaotic, but not broken. Designed. A loop meant to corrupt logs, reroute signals, and hide its own existence. A loop that didn't belong to the Hudson Core. A loop that wasn't written by any Hudson engineer. Lucas's voice came out barely above a breath. Someone did this on purpose. The room went cold. The engineers looked at each other with dawning horror. Sarah's entire body stiffened. "Lucas," she breathed. "We need to tell Mr. Hudson right now." But Lucas wasn't done. He scrolled deeper, and the screen exploded with similar loops. Not one, not 10, hundreds, hidden beneath stabilized systems, embedded inside older code, buried beneath legitimate architecture like microscopic landmines, each one more damaging than the last, each one placed with precision, each one designed not to break the system quickly, but to break it slowly, quietly. irreversibly. Every engineer gasped as the truth hit them. This wasn't an accident. This is sabotage, deep sabotage. There's no way this was hidden by mistake. Jesus, how long has this been inside the architecture? Lucas whispered, a year. Sarah's hands flew to her mouth. The engineers froze. A year, someone whispered. A full year. That means this was planned from the start. Lucas nodded, still scanning. I can see the date markers. Sarah swallowed hard, voice trembling as panic surged through her. Lucas, we're stopping now, she said, pulling at him gently. We are telling Mr. Hudson. Immediately. Lucas shook his head without looking away. Not yet. Lucas, I need to finish fixing it. Sarah collapsed into the chair beside him, eyes filling with tears. Baby, this is too big. Too dangerous. We have to tell someone. Lucas finally looked at her, not scared, not overwhelmed. Determined. Mom, if I stop now, all of this will get worse. The system will break again. They'll blame the wrong people. And the person who did this will hide it again. His voice wavered, not in fear, but in urgency. I have to finish. Sarah's heart twisted painfully. She knew that tone. It was the tone he used when he had already made a decision he believed in deeply. Lucas, it's not your job to protect this company, she whispered. Lucas shook his head. I'm not protecting the company. He pointed at the screens, the failures, the broken logic, the sabotage no one else had seen. I'm protecting people. Something cracked inside Sarah. Pride, fear, love, all tangled together. She wiped his forehead gently. Then I'm staying right here with you. Lucas's small hand covered hers. I know. Across the lab, the engineers had gone from skeptics to students. They crowded around Lucas's console, taking notes, whispering questions, trying to understand the patterns only he could see. Wait, how did you spot that deviation? The scanner doesn't even flag this loop. He found an entire shadow architecture. The person who did this was good. Really good. And the kid is better, someone whispered. Sarah overheard that last line. It sent a jolt of emotions racing through her chest. Fear for him, awe of him, and a profound sorrow for the life she had tried so hard to keep simple. Her son wasn't meant for simple, and maybe he never had been. Up in his office, Douglas was still watching. At first, he leaned close to the glass. Then he paced. Then he stood perfectly still, staring at the boy rewriting his empire. When Lucas revealed the sabotage loops, Douglas's hand tightened around the edge of his desk. He saw the code. He recognized it. His blood froze. Someone had attacked his life's work. Someone close. Someone skilled. Someone he should have detected, but didn't. He whispered to himself, how did a child find this first? His pride was cracking. His certainty was crumbling. His ego was bleeding. But beneath all of that, respect took root. Raw, undeniable, reluctant respect. For the boy, for his mind, for the way he worked. As though the entire Hudson Core was nothing more than a story only he knew how to read. Douglas whispered, fix it, kid, just fix it. He would never admit he said the words. Not out loud. By 3:45 a.m., Lucas's typing slowed. His fingers were trembling. His eyes were heavy. But he kept going. Loop after loop. Trap after trap. Sabotage after sabotage. He dismantled them with the determination of someone who understood the stakes far better than his age should allow. Sarah stroked his back gently, voice soft. You're doing amazing, but you have to rest soon. After this part, Lucas murmured. You said that 10 minutes ago. Just this part. Sarah's eyes watered. You don't have to be a hero, she whispered. But Lucas wasn't listening anymore. He was already lost again in the broken architecture, already tracing paths no one else could see, already rewriting the end of a story someone had tried very hard to destroy. And as the night stretched toward dawn, one truth hung unspoken in the air. Lucas wasn't just fixing code. He was uncovering a crime, a betrayal, a hidden enemy, and he would not stop, not until every last piece of broken logic was restored, not until the sun rose, not until the Hudson Core was whole again. By 4:15 a.m., the operations lab was thick with tension, the kind that coils in the air before something catastrophic snaps. Lucas sat rigid in his chair, eyes locked onto the deepest layer of the Hudson core's architecture. Lines of code flashed rapidly, revealing hidden pathways that hadn't been touched in months. Sarah stood behind him, rubbing his shoulders gently, trying to keep herself calm even as her heart pounded painfully hard. The engineers surrounding them had gone completely silent. No one moved. No one spoke. They just watched. Because Lucas wasn't just fixing broken functions anymore. He was following footprints. Digital footprints left behind by the saboteur. He whispered under his breath, "They hit it here, then changed the path so nobody would find it." The engineers leaned closer. A head programmer muttered, "This is intentional obfuscation. Who even thinks like this?" Lucas answered without looking up. "Someone smart. Someone who knows how the system breathes." Sarah shivered. He was talking like a seasoned architect, not like a 10-year-old boy. Another string of corrupted code unfolded before him. Lucas's face hardened. Then he spoke the words that cracked the night open. "It's all coming from the same place." One of the tech leads crouched beside him. "Where? Show us." Lucas highlighted a small identifier, barely visible unless you knew what to look for. "A signature," a name embedded in the metadata trail. The screen magnified it. A. Keller. The room went still. The chief engineer swallowed. No, that can't be." Another whispered, "That's impossible." A third backed away a step, face pale. Sarah frowned. "Who is that?" The silence broke softly, grimly. "Dr. Adrian Keller. He's our chief systems director. He built half this architecture. He would have the access level to do all of this." Lucas zoomed in further, pulling up timestamps, modification markers, and authentication keys. Every piece pointed to the same person. Every sabotage loop. Every hidden trap. Every planted failure. "A year," Lucas murmured. "He's been doing this for a year." Sarah's stomach dropped. Why would a man like that hurt his own company? No one answered. Because no one knew. Because no one wanted to know. Because the truth felt too big, too dangerous. A heavy click echoed across the lab. The door opened, and Dr. Adrian Keller himself walked inside. Perfect suit, perfect composure, perfect timing. He froze when he saw the screens. His eyes locked onto Lucas's work. The exposed loops, the highlighted signature, the collapse of his months of hidden sabotage. His face drained of color, then flushed deep red. In 2 seconds, panic replaced every ounce of his carefully built confidence. What is this?" Keller demanded, stepping forward quickly. "Who authorized access to Level 6 architecture? Who touched my sections?" The engineers stepped back. Some glared. Some looked terrified. Lucas simply looked at Keller, calmly, steadily, as though he were studying another broken pattern. "You did it," Lucas said softly. "All of it." Keller exploded. "That's absurd. This is a child. This is nothing but—" "Dr. Keller." The voice cut through the room like a blade. Douglas Hudson stood in the doorway of his office, shoulders squared, eyes deadly. He approached slowly, each step reverberating across the lab. He didn't look at Lucas. He didn't look at the engineers. He looked directly at Keller, and Keller's face twisted with something ugly. "Fear." Douglas stopped just inches away. "Explain the signature," he said coldly. Keller swallowed. "That someone forged." "Explain the access logs. That could be manipulated." "Explain the data siphon you routed through subsystem 4.2. Keller froze. Douglas's voice dropped lower, quieter. "You nearly destroyed my company." Keller snapped back. "Your company was going to fail anyway. You're reckless, Hudson. You ignore my projections. You dismiss my warnings. You were taking us straight into a disaster, and I wasn't going to let my career die with your ego." A horrified gasp rippled through the lab. Douglas's jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. "You sabotaged my life's work," he said softly. "No, geirrhist. I saved myself." He pointed angrily at Lucas. "And you let a child tamper with critical systems. This is insane. None of this would hold up under federal review." "That's where you're wrong, Dr. Keller." The new voice came from the left. 3 men in dark jackets stepped forward. Jackets with letters across the chest. FBI. Sarah's breath caught. The agents had been on site since the demonstration failure. Observing. Documenting. Waiting. The lead agent approached Keller. "Dr. Adrian Keller," he said flatly, "you are under federal investigation for cyber sabotage, infrastructure tampering, data theft, and attempted corporate destabilization." Keller's mouth fell open. The agent continued, "We have the logs. We have timestamps. We have the backdoor routes. And now, thanks to this young man, we have the full trail tying every event back to you." Keller spun toward Lucas, eyes ablaze with hatred. "You!" Sarah rushed forward, shielding her son. "Don't you dare!" she snapped, voice shaking with rage and fear. Lucas looked up at Keller without fear. "You broke it," he said simply. "I fixed it." Keller lunged, but agents grabbed him instantly. He fought weakly, shouting, spitting venom. "You'll regret this, Hudson. All of you." No one answered. They didn't need to, because everyone knew he had already lost. The agents cuffed him, dragged him out, and the doors slammed shut with a final, echoing thud. Silence. A long, trembling silence. Sarah turned to Lucas, and the strength she had held together all night finally cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Oh, God, baby," she pulled him into her arms, holding him with a trembling ferocity. "I'm so proud of you, so proud, but I was so scared." Lucas hugged her back, small and exhausted. "I am okay, Mom." She cried harder. The engineers wiped tears of their own. Some clapped softly. Some whispered Lucas's name as though he were a legend being born. Douglas stood motionless. For the first time in his life, the billionaire who commanded governments, corporations, and entire infrastructures looked speechless. He approached Sarah slowly, carefully, respectfully. "Mrs. Williams," he said quietly, voice stripped of arrogance, "I owe you an apology." Sarah, still holding Lucas, looked up at him through blurred eyes. Douglas exhaled. "I put your son in danger. I insulted him. I mocked him. And I turned this night into something it never should have been." He swallowed thickly. "He saved my company. He saved my reputation. He exposed a traitor I trusted." His voice trembled just once. "And I am truly sorry." Sarah stared at him, not with anger, not with gratitude, with shock, because the apology was real, and sincere, and unfiltered. Lucas looked between them. "It's okay," he whispered. "We fixed it." Douglas's lips twitched, caught between a smile and disbelief. "You didn't just fix it, Lucas," he said softly. "You saved all of us." The boy blinked sleepily. "I'm tired now." Sarah let out a soft, tearful laugh. Douglas nodded immediately. "Then you should rest. Both of you." He paused. "And whatever happens next, you won't face it alone." Sarah didn't know what that meant. Not yet. But the look in Douglas's eyes, softened, humbled, changed, told her one truth. Nothing about their lives would ever be the same again. By the time dawn crept over the skyline, Hudson Dynamics no longer felt like a company. It felt like the center of the world. The operations lab buzzed with intense electric energy. Regulators in dark suits assembled in rows. Cameras were positioned everywhere, on tripods, handheld rigs, drones sweeping across the ceiling. Screens flickered with connection lines to global live streams. Investors filled the back of the room, some nervous, some furious, some pale with anticipation. Everyone was here for one reason: to watch Hudson Dynamics either rise from the ashes or die on camera. And at the center of it all, sitting quietly on a metal chair far from the spotlight, was Lucas Williams. He leaned sleepily against his mother's side, his small hand curled into hers. He looked like any tired 10-year-old who had been awake far too long. Only the engineers who stood around him, protectively, reverently, knew the truth. The system had survived because of him. Sarah stroked his hair, whispering, "Try to rest. It'll be over soon." Lucas nodded, eyes drooping. "Okay." Across the room, Douglas adjusted his tie for the 10th time, his usual confidence cracked by a very real fear. Today, everything was on the line. Regulators with clipboards murmured among themselves. "This will determine certification renewal. If the core destabilizes again, we issue an immediate shutdown." Billions of dollars in federal contracts on the line. Investors in Asia are already threatening lawsuits. It was chaos wrapped in professionalism. And then someone tapped a microphone. The room froze. A senior regulator stepped forward. "Mr. Hudson," she said, "we will begin the full architecture test in 5 minutes. Is the system ready?" Douglas inhaled, deep, steady, controlled. "Yes," he said. Then quieter, thanks to him. He turned his head slightly toward Lucas. It was subtle, quiet, private, but genuine. Sarah caught the look. For a moment, their eyes met. She didn't smile. Not yet. But she didn't look away either. 5 minutes later, the countdown began. The live streams blinked online. News anchors whispered updates. Investors leaned forward in their seats. Tech analysts on the screens speculated. Hudson Dynamics is hanging by a thread. One wrong movement and the core collapses. This may be the most critical infrastructure test of the decade. And through all the noise, Lucas sat silently beside his mother, watching. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't scared. He simply knew. Douglas stepped into the spotlight at the center of the lab. He didn't look like the arrogant billionaire who had strutted through here earlier. He looked human, fallible, humbled. He gripped the podium. "Thank you all for being here," he began. The room quieted instantly. "As you know, last night we suffered a catastrophic collapse of the Hudson core." A wave of whispers. Douglas continued. "But overnight, my team..." He hesitated, then corrected himself. "Our team found and repaired every failure in the architecture." Sarah looked at Lucas. Lucas blinked sleepily. Douglas's voice lowered. "And one person, in particular, deserves quiet recognition for guiding us through the most complex recovery in this company's history." A few regulators turned. Engineers looked at Lucas. Journalists scrambled for their cameras. Sarah's pulse spiked. But Douglas didn't say the boy's name. Not yet. He just looked at Lucas, long enough for the engineers and Sarah to understand he meant it. Long enough for Lucas to give a tiny, sleepy smile. Then Douglas turned back to the podium. "Begin the test." A technician pressed the initialization key. The entire lab went silent. Screens flickered. Lights pulsed. The Hudson core awakened. Subsystem 1, stabilization. Green. Subsystem 2, load balance. Green. Subsystem 3, memory distribution. Green. Regulators leaned forward. Cameras zoomed in. Investors held their breath. Subsystem 4, cross-link integrity. Green. Engineers started whispering prayers. Sarah clutched Lucas tighter. Subsystem 5, communication network. Green. Subsystem 6, predictive logic. Green. An old engineer's voice cracked. "Yvette, I've never seen it this clean." Subsystem 7, full system synchronization. The room went dead silent. Everyone stared at the screen. Sarah's heartbeat thundered in her ears. Lucas whispered softly, barely awake, "It'll be green." A beep. Then, green. Every subsystem, every module, every architecture layer. All green. All perfect. All stable. A wave of emotion ripped across the room. The engineers cheered first, shouting, crying, hugging each other. Investors erupted behind them. Phones rang out with frantic, ecstatic voices from around the world. Regulators stared at their tablets, stunned. One finally said aloud, "The Hudson core is fully restored. Stabilized. Secure. Certified." Cameras flashed in rapid bursts. Journalists shouted questions. Technicians wiped their eyes, overwhelmed. Douglas slumped forward for a moment, relief collapsing through him like a breached dam. He pressed his hand to his forehead, inhaled deeply, then exhaled everything he had been holding in for the past 24 hours. He had been saved, not by luck, not by his engineers, not by the regulators, by a boy who wasn't even supposed to be in the building. Sarah hugged Lucas tightly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "You did it," she whispered. "Baby, you really did it." Lucas leaned into her, exhausted but smiling. "I told you," he murmured. "It just needed to be fixed." Sarah kissed his forehead. Her hands trembled, but her voice didn't. "You saved them all, sweetheart. Every single one." Across the room, Douglas finally approached them. He didn't rush. He didn't stand tall. He didn't pretend. He walked like a man approaching something sacred. When he reached them, He didn't look at the cameras or the investors or the regulators. He looked only at Lucas and Sarah, and in a voice barely above a whisper, a voice the microphones didn't catch, he said, "Thank you for saving my company, for saving my life's work, for giving us all a second chance." Lucas smiled sleepily. Sarah held her breath. Douglas's voice softened further, humbled to the core. "And whatever comes next, I owe you more than I can ever repay." Sarah finally met his eyes, and this time she did smile. Just a little, just enough for Douglas to exhale for the first time that morning, not in fear, but in hope. The celebration inside Hudson Dynamics had begun to swell. Engineers cheering, regulators shaking hands, investors calling their boards in frantic excitement. But the man at the center of it all stood frozen. Douglas Hudson hadn't moved in nearly a full minute. He stared at the sea of cameras gathered at the front of the room. He stared at his employees, his people, who had almost watched their livelihoods implode. And then his eyes settled on one small boy leaning against his mother. Lucas, barely awake, feet dangling from a metal chair. A 10-year-old who saved the largest infrastructure system in the country. Something cracked open inside Douglas. Not fear, not ego, not pride. Something deeper, older, raw. A man seeing the truth for the first time. He exhaled shakily, then stepped up to the podium again. The cameras redirected toward him like a living organism turning its gaze. The room dimmed. The world watched. Douglas gripped the microphone. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, his voice broke. "I was wrong." The room stilled instantly. He swallowed, eyes flickering toward Lucas. "I was wrong about what happened last night. Wrong about who to trust. Wrong about who deserved respect." Whispers spread like ripples in water. Douglas continued, voice lowering with sincerity he had spent years hiding. "There's a boy in this room," he said, "who did something no adult here, not even myself, was able to do." He turned fully toward Lucas now. "This boy saved my legacy." Gasps fluttered through the room. Cameras clicked furiously. Lucas blinked up at Douglas, confused and tired, not realizing he had changed the world overnight. Douglas wasn't finished. And not just him, he said hoarsely. His mother, Sarah Williams, stood by him through every step. She protected him. She supported him. She allowed him to help us when she had every reason to walk away. Sarah froze, her hand gripping Lucas's tighter. Douglas's chest tightened. "This family," he said, voice soft but resonant, "saved my future." A hush fell over the room. Sarah covered her mouth as tears streamed down her cheeks. Silent, overwhelmed, uncontrollable. Never in her life had someone powerful spoken of her like that. Never had anyone looked at her son and seen value, brilliance, destiny. Lucas tugged her sleeve. "Mom, why are you crying?" She leaned down, voice trembling. "Because someone finally sees you." The engineers erupted in applause first. Then the regulators. Then the investors in the back. Then the journalists. And soon the entire room thundered with cheering. Not for Douglas. Not for Hudson Dynamics. But for a boy with sleepy eyes and a sketchbook tucked under his arm. Cameras zoomed in on Lucas, capturing his shy smile, his small frame dwarfed by the giant lab around him. Within minutes, social feeds flooded. 10-year-old saves global tech giant. Meet the genius behind Hudson's miraculous recovery. America's youngest systems mind. Lucas had become a national symbol before he even left his chair. Sarah held him tightly, whispering blessings, gratitude, and disbelief into his hair. Douglas stepped down from the podium, not toward the cameras, not toward the investors lining up to congratulate him. He walked straight towards Sarah and Lucas, one step at a time. He stopped in front of them. His voice, once sharp and commanding, now softened into something almost fragile. "Sarah." She looked up through tears, still recovering from the shock of hearing her name in front of the world. Douglas inhaled slowly. "Thank you," he said, "for trusting him and for trusting us when you didn't have to." Her breath hitched. She wiped her eyes, embarrassed by how emotional she was. "I didn't know what to do," she whispered. "I just wanted him safe." Douglas nodded. "I understand." He looked down at Lucas. The boy blinked up at him, exhausted but curious. Douglas crouched, so their eyes were level. "You saved me," he said. Lucas shrugged lightly. "It was broken. I fixed it." Douglas let out a shaky laugh, the first true laugh he'd had in months. Then he turned back to Sarah. "You raised a remarkable son." She froze. Her lips parted. Her breath trembled. Her heart stumbled. It wasn't praise, it was reverence. And it hit her harder than anything she'd ever heard. She whispered, "Thank you, but I didn't raise a genius. I just raised my boy." Douglas shook his head gently. "You raised someone extraordinary. You should be proud." Her eyes softened, filling again. But this time the tears weren't from fear or exhaustion. They were from something new, warm, unexpected, dangerous in the gentlest way. Respect, connection, a slowly forming bond neither of them fully understood yet. Lucas yawned loudly, interrupting the emotion. Both adults laughed, quietly, unexpectedly in sync. And in that moment, something shifted. Douglas wasn't looking at an employee's child. He wasn't looking at a genius anomaly. He wasn't even looking at the boy who saved his empire. He was looking at them, mother and son, a family that had walked into his life by accident and changed it forever. He stood, straightened his jacket, and spoke softly. "I'd like to talk to both of you later, privately, about what comes next." Sarah's heart fluttered, uncertain, anxious, but hopeful. She nodded slowly. "Okay." Douglas hesitated for the briefest second, as if wanting to say more, but not yet knowing how. Then he stepped away, to face the cameras, with a humility the world had never seen from him. And Sarah watched him go, feeling something she didn't expect. A pull, a connection, delicate, powerful, new. Lucas leaned into her and whispered sleepily, "Mom, I like him." Sarah swallowed hard. "Yeah," she whispered back. "I think I do too." And as dawn fully broke over Hudson Dynamics, lighting the lab in soft gold, one truth settled unshakably into the morning. This wasn't the end of their story. It was the beginning. The crisis at Hudson Dynamics became front-page news for weeks. But the miracle that saved the company, the quiet brilliance of a 10-year-old boy, became a story the world refused to let go of. Reporters camped outside the building. News anchors replayed Douglas's public confession. Parents across the country spoke their children's names with new hope. And in the middle of the noise, in the storm of praise, questions, interviews, and invitations, sat Sarah and Lucas Williams. Simple people, ordinary people, simple people, ordinary people, whose lives had been rewritten overnight. But what happened after the cameras moved on was something none of them expected. The first change happened quietly. Douglas requested a private meeting with Sarah, not with assistants, not with legal counsel, just himself. They met in his spacious, sunlit conference room overlooking the city, a room Sarah had only ever seen when mopping floors. Douglas stood when she walked in. He gestured to a chair. She sat hesitantly. Lucas sat next to her, swinging his legs, clutching his sketchbook. For a long moment, Douglas simply studied them. The mother who had fought for her son, and the boy who had saved him. Finally, he spoke. "Sarah, I want you to join Hudson Dynamics." Her eyebrows shot up. "As what? A janitor still?" Douglas shook his head. "No, as head of our community outreach and educational development." Sarah blinked. "What? No, I don't have that kind of experience." "You do," Douglas said softly. "You just don't know it yet." She stared at him. "You want me to be a leader?" "I want families who walk through this company to see someone who understands them," Douglas said. "Someone grounded, someone real, someone who doesn't forget where she came from." Her heart thudded painfully. "Douglas, I'm not sure I'm qualified." "You're more qualified than half the executives here." It wasn't flattery. It was conviction. Sarah's throat tightened. "You would trust me with something that important?" Douglas didn't hesitate. "I trust you with far more than that." Her breath hitched. She didn't know how to answer. All she could do was nod softly. "I'll think about it." Douglas smiled, gently, respectfully. "Take all the time you need." And he meant it. The second change was even bigger. Douglas turned to Lucas with a small, warm smile. "As for you," he said, "I want to give you something." Lucas perked up. A robot. Douglas laughed. Not exactly, but maybe someday. He placed a folder on the table. Inside were brochures, program outlines, and acceptance letters. Not the kind you applied for. The kind written specifically for one child. I've arranged placements for you in 3 of the top STEM mentorship programs in the country, Douglas said softly. Private sessions with leading architects. Hands-on labs. Access to tools that even I didn't have at your age. Lucas's eyes widened. For me? Yes, Douglas said. For you. And I'll fund everything personally. No strings. No expectations. Just opportunity. Lucas blinked rapidly, then whispered, "Thank you." Sarah's chest squeezed. She looked at Douglas, really looked at him. "You don't have to do this," she murmured. "I want to," he said. "And Lucas deserves it." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. Sarah swallowed. Slowly, carefully, her guard began to lower. Days turned into weeks. And in those weeks, something unexpected blossomed. Douglas became part of their lives. Not through power, not through obligation, but through presence. He invited them to casual dinners, simple places, quiet spots, nothing extravagant. He let Lucas choose the restaurants, which meant a surprising number of pizza nights. He visited Lucas's programs, standing in the back of the room as the boy dismantled problems that left mentors speechless. He asked Sarah about her past, her struggles, her dreams, her fears, and he listened. Truly listened. They laughed more than either expected. They talked about life, about work, about Lucas's little quirks and habits. Despite his wealth, his position, his status, Douglas never tried to impress her. He simply tried to understand her. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. Because Sarah found herself smiling around him, trusting him, relaxing in ways she hadn't in years. And Douglas found himself drawn to her warmth in a way he hadn't felt in decades. A way that scared him. A way he didn't try to hide anymore. He admired her strength, her honesty, her quiet resilience. And every time she laughed, a real, unrestrained laugh, his chest tightened with something he had no name for. But the most profound shift happened between Douglas and Lucas. The boy who once barely spoke to him now greeted Douglas with excited explanations of new projects. He tugged at Douglas's sleeve to show him new diagrams he drew. He called him Mr. Doug, then eventually just Doug. Then, one day, "Can you help me with this?" And Douglas did. Every time, they built small robots together. They watched engineering videos. Lucas helped Douglas understand layers of the Hudson core Douglas didn't even know existed. And quietly, almost naturally, Lucas began leaning against him during walks, throwing his arms around him during goodbyes, looking at him with an affection Douglas hadn't felt since his own childhood. One evening, after a long tutoring session, Lucas hugged him tightly and whispered, "I'm glad you're in our life now." Douglas froze. His throat tightened. His heart stuttered. He rested his hand gently on the boy's back. "I'm glad too," he whispered. The words felt fragile. True. Dangerously true. Sarah watched them from across the room. Her chest warmed. Her heart ached. Because she saw it. Douglas wasn't just grateful. He was changing. He wasn't just helping her son. He was bonding with him, caring for him, loving him. And the deeper truth, the one Sarah didn't want to admit yet, was that she was changing too. She liked Douglas. Not the billionaire. Not the CEO. The man. The one who apologized without ego. The one who protected her son. The one who made space for them in a world they never thought they'd belong in. One night, as Lucas slept in the back seat after another long day, Sarah and Douglas stood beside her car under the parking lot lights. Neither spoke for a long moment. Finally, Douglas turned to her. "I know all of this has been overwhelming," he said quietly. "The attention, the programs, the job offer." Sarah nodded softly. "It has. I don't ever want you to feel pressured," he continued. "Not by me, not by this company. Whatever you choose, I will support you." Her breath wavered. He meant it. And that sincerity, that gentle honesty, was more dangerous than any power he held. She looked up at him, whispering, "Douglas, why are you doing all this?" He inhaled, then said the words he hadn't dared say until now. "Because I owe you more than gratitude." He paused. "And because, Ikare, About both of you. Sarah's heart skipped. Her fingers trembled. She looked away, not out of rejection, but because something in her chest was shifting, unfurling like a long-buried seed suddenly touched by sunlight. Lucas murmured sleepily in the car. Douglas stepped back, giving her space, giving her time. He didn't push. He didn't demand. He simply waited. And she realized something. Douglas wasn't just rebuilding a company. He was rebuilding himself. And slowly, carefully, beautifully, he was building something else too. A bond, a connection, a beginning, a family he had never had, a family she never expected, a family Lucas had already accepted. The question now was simple. Was she ready to accept it too? Evenings settled over the city like a warm, quiet sigh. Hudson Dynamics glowed in the distance. No longer a battlefield of crisis, but a monument reborn. Inside the building, the Hudson core pulsed with steady green lights, its rhythm calm and confident. Everything was working. Everything was safe. But the person standing at the balcony of Douglas's private office didn't care about flawless systems or global praise. He cared about what waited behind him. Sarah and Lucas. Douglas turned from the windows as they entered. Lucas ran in first, excited, waving a new schematic he had drawn. Sarah walked more slowly, nervous, not because she feared Douglas, but because tonight felt different. Softer, heavier, more real. Douglas gave Lucas a warm smile and knelt to greet him. "Let me see," he said. Lucas eagerly handed over the paper, a design for a small drone. Douglas studied it carefully. "You're improving so fast." Lucas beamed. Sarah's heart swelled at the sight. She had watched this bond grow, tentatively at first, then steadily, deeply, a bond she never expected, a bond Lucas clearly cherished. Douglas ruffled the boy's hair and gently said, "Why don't you go check the model printer? I asked the tech team to reserve one for you. It's all yours tonight." Lucas's eyes went wide. "Really? Really?" He sprinted out of the office. The door closed softly behind him, leaving Douglas and Sarah alone. Her breath caught. This is it, she thought. This is the moment everything shifts. Douglas stepped closer, slow enough to respect her boundaries, close enough for her to feel the warmth in his presence. "Sarah," he said softly, "I need to tell you something." Her hands clasped nervously in front of her. "Okay." Douglas inhaled, slow, steady, like someone preparing to reveal a truth they've been holding for far too long. "You saved my legacy," he began. His voice thickened. "But you also saved me." Sarah's lips parted, surprise flickering across her face. Douglas continued, unable to hold back. "When that system collapsed, I thought my life was over. I thought everything I'd built was gone. My ego, my pride, my failures, they were all crashing down." He stepped closer, searching her eyes. "And you and Lucas walked into my life like a bolt of light in the dark." Sarah swallowed hard. Douglas's voice lowered. "You didn't just save Hudson Dynamics. You reminded me what matters. You reminded me what it feels like to care, to fight for something real." He shook his head, almost laughing at himself. "I have money, power, reputation, but none of it meant anything until you two came into my world." Sarah blinked rapidly, tears gathering. "But Douglas," she whispered, "we aren't from your world. We're not the same. You're a billionaire CEO. I'm a single mom who struggled for years. I cleaned your floors. People will talk. They'll judge. And I've been hurt before. I don't want that for me. I don't want that for my son." Douglas stepped closer, close enough for her to feel his sincerity radiating like warmth. "I'm not asking you to enter my world," he said softly. "I'm asking to enter yours." Sarah froze. His voice deepened, trembling with truth. "I don't want to be with you as a CEO, or as a billionaire, or as someone above you. I want to be with you as a man who finally understands what love is supposed to look like, what family is supposed to feel like." Sarah looked away, overwhelmed. Douglas gently touched her hand, but waited for permission. She didn't pull away. He continued in a whisper. "I want to be part of Lucas's life. I want to help him grow, protect him, guide him. Not because he's a genius, but because he's yours. Because he's the most extraordinary boy I've ever met." Tears slipped down Sarah's cheeks. "And I want to be part of your life, Sarah. Not to change you, not to fix you, but to stand beside you." Her shoulders shook with silent emotion. Douglas lifted her chin gently, not forcing, just inviting. "Tell me you don't feel this too," he whispered. She couldn't, because she did. Deeply. She had tried to ignore it, tried to hide it beneath caution and fear. But it was there. Every time he looked at her with softness he reserved only for her. Every time he made Lucas laugh with a warmth she never imagined from a man like him. Every time he showed up, not out of duty, but out of genuine care. She finally met his gaze fully. "Douglas, I do feel it," she whispered. "I'm just scared." He exhaled, relieved and tender. "I'll spend the rest of my life giving you reasons not to be." A small, broken, beautiful laugh escaped her. He smiled, just slightly, but enough to soften every sharp edge he once carried. The office door creaked open. Lucas peeked inside. "Mom? Doug? Are you okay?" Sarah turned toward him, tears still fresh on her cheeks. Douglas stepped back, giving her the space to decide. She crouched down and opened her arms. Lucas ran into them immediately. She held him tight, whispering into his hair. "Baby, what do you think about Doug being part of our lives?" Lucas pulled back and blinked. "Like forever?" Sarah's heart squeezed painfully. "Maybe, if you want that too." Lucas looked over at Douglas. Something warm flickered in the boy's eyes. "Doug," he asked softly, "do you want to be with us?" Douglas crouched down to Lucas's level, eyes soft and vulnerable. "More than anything in the world," he whispered. Lucas thought for a moment, then reached out and wrapped his small arms around Douglas's neck. Douglas froze, then melted into the embrace, holding Lucas with a tenderness he didn't know he had inside him. Sarah covered her mouth, tears falling freely. Lucas pulled back slightly and whispered, "I want you with us too." Douglas swallowed hard. That was it. That was the moment everything changed. Slowly, Sarah moved toward them. Douglas rose, and without overthinking, without fear, without hesitation, she stepped into Douglas's arms. He held her tightly. She melted into him. Lucas hugged them both. A family. Imperfect, unexpected, miraculous. Formed in the middle of a CEO's office at sunset. 3 hearts learning how to beat together. 3 lives rewritten by courage, brilliance, and love. Later that night, as they stood looking out at the city, Lucas pressed a button on the display wall. The Hudson core monitors lit up softly. Pulsing green, flawless, stable. Sarah smiled. Douglas slipped his arm around her waist gently. Lucas leaned into both of them. The core hummed with perfect rhythm, just like them. For the first time in his life, Douglas Hudson didn't see systems or code or power. He saw his future, his family, his heart, finally whole. If you enjoyed this story and believe that true power is born from humility and that love often appears in the most mysterious and unexpected places, kindly share this story and subscribe for more uplifting, heart-moving stories.